What's up, Bucs Squad? I'm your host, Jaron Spor. I'm going to tell you why Mike Evans might not be in Tampa next year.
I'm Marcus Ray, Michigan All-American, and I'm going to tell you what I think about Zac Robinson and what he's going to be able to accomplish.
And I'm Ryan Lavoie, and I'm going to tell you why Zac Robinson, when you think about it, actually makes a lot of sense for the Bucs offensive coordinating job.
Hey, Tampa Bay, it's the Buccaneers squad. Everything Tampa Bay Buccaneers every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of the Sunshine State, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. With a touch of the Buccaneer way, the Buccaneer Squad Show starts now.
What's up, Bucs Squad? Like I said, I'm your host, Jaron Spor. We got a packed show for you today. We're going to break down the Zac Robinson hire because the last time we were with you, we said it was probably going to pop any second, and of course, it popped overnight right after our podcast ended. So we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to dive into Bruce Arians' comments on Mike Evans and Lavonte David. Also, Mike Evans' next team might not be in Tampa. We'll talk about that before wrapping it up by recapping the conference championship weekend in the Around the NFL segment. But, Brian, I want to start with you. Usually I will start and kind of give my feedback, but Marcus and I both have talked about the Zac Robinson thing a lot. You haven't been able to join us during these conversations. What is your initial thought on Zac Robinson now being the offensive coordinator?
So, fortunately, we got to at least broach the subject. I think a week or two ago was the last time I was on, and I basically said I thought that he was candidate number 3 for the Bucs, where you would want Monken or you would want McDaniel, but you understand McDaniel is the absolute top choice for most people at coordinator. He's getting a few head coach bites. He opted to take the Justin Herbert OC job, which is fair. I would love to work with Justin Herbert also. And then you have, of course, Monken follow John Harbaugh. So just a bunch of Harbaughs taking up the 2 OC candidates. So number 3 for me was Zac Robinson. And at that point, I say, is it a home run? No, I don't think so. But here's why it makes sense. I think first, even though it was just a few games, I get it. There is a prior relationship with Baker Mayfield. And Baker Mayfield has had so many different coaches and coordinators and all sorts of things that even if it's just a few games, it was the few games that gave Baker one more chance to be a starter in the NFL, to be fair, that time in Los Angeles. So it worked with Liam Cohen being there. Let's see how Zac Robinson does working with him. And then I think the other point, too, is Zac in Atlanta had, questionable offense, right? They produced yards better than they produced points. Well, I look at the quarterback play for that, and I think to myself, Atlanta, working with average to subpar quarterback play, is not going to execute in the red zone as well. You're going to stack the box to stop Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. And so when you have a quarterback not making these tight window throws, not making these plays on the run, that sort of thing, it does handicap you a little bit, and you try to lean on the bread and butter, but the other team knows you're going to do that. And so I think that, yes, it meant he was not as creative as he could have been, but I think it was a forced hand. And I think that working with Baker Mayfield, more of a quarterback-driven offense rather than a running back-driven offense, I think that can give a better side of Zac Robinson in those red areas. Because, again, I like the way Atlanta moved the ball. Just statistically, they were much better at total yards than they were at points per game. So I think it's in there. I think the concepts are in there. I just think that having that quarterback play in Atlanta hurt him. And one thing interesting with Zac is, too, it was a bit of a gamble, and we'll see how much of it he does in Tampa. He did a lot of pistol stuff, and he did a lot of outside zone with Bijan Robinson. And, Bucky Irving is a very dynamic back, but, Bijan is kind of at another level right now. So I wonder how much he does scale that back and go back to a little bit more of a traditional stuff. Again, I'm not saying that it doesn't have some of the traditional concepts, but it was a little more unique, a little more pistol, a little more outside running. But again, all in all, I think that this will be an offense built more around Baker than it was in Atlanta. It was built more around the running back, and understandably so for what the Falcons had personnel-wise.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ryan. And I do think it'll be quarterback-driven. I think you got more weapons on the outside. I would give the nod at running back to Atlanta, maybe even tight end. But at the same time, here's where my concerns are. This past season, Zac Robinson's offense, they averaged about 207 yards passing, 125 rushing, and about 21 points a game. That's not good enough, I don't think, to scare anybody or definitely even win the division unless it's a bad division like the NFC South was. And not necessarily bad division, but a division that didn't have too much separation between their top three teams, right? They had to go to the tiebreaker to figure out who was going to the playoff round. So in 2024, they were a little more explosive. They averaged about 240 passing, 130 rushing, and about 23 points a game. So I don't know if it was attributed to people figuring out what Zac has going on as a second-year coordinator, because you can catch some people off guard, or like you mentioned, was it the quarterback play? I mean, obviously he had two different guys in there, and so you have to build your scheme based on your personnel. And I think with Zac going to Tampa Bay, that's what he's going to do. Obviously depending on what Mike does when he comes back, when he makes his announcement through free agency, and we'll talk about that. But I just think that there's more meat on the bone in Tampa than there is as far as the passing game. He probably got a better offensive line for what it's worth too. So, I mean, it's definitely an upgrade. And I think the biggest thing for me is this. He comes from the same division. And when that happens, there's a lot of common opponents. He knows the division. He's called plays against the Saints, and he's called plays against Carolina, and Tampa. And I think he and Todd Bowles, he might save Todd's job. So you have to understand this could be a hire that could breathe some life back into Baker if they can stay healthy, and then you start utilizing all the weapons. Todd, doesn't have to stop people as much because they're scoring, and he knows the division. So I think for me that it's a very smart hire, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, it obviously made a lot of sense, like both of you guys mentioned. And obviously, as Ryan talked about, we were really high on Munkin and we were higher on Mike McDaniel. But those guys were, they went to different places, and so you had to find your next guy. And so for them to get their next guy is also a big thing, because he could have went to other places and been the coordinator for different teams. The Eagles were a team that were obviously still after an offensive coordinator. At least last I checked, they were still after one. But regardless, he was someone that was at least mentioned in that conversation, and he still chose to go to Tampa. As far as I've seen a lot of people concerned about the pistol offense, the formation that he ran. And as far as the run schemes and things like that, you had to figure that out with Bucky. But as far as for the quarterback, that would be fine with Baker. He ran a lot of that in college, and so that's not going to be an issue for him. And then also, I'm assuming they'll do a lot of just traditional shotgun type stuff, which is obviously what Baker excelled at as well. But I have no kind of worry about him tailoring his offense to fit his quarterback and his team around him. And the big question is, was the kind of struggles in Atlanta because of stuff we talked about, the personnel, the quarterback, things like that, or was it shortcomings on his part? It was probably a little bit of both. As Marcus can attest, usually it is a little bit of both. Sometimes it's the players and sometimes it's the coaches as well. It's not just one person or the other. Now, sometimes it can be, but that's the big question for Zac Robinson that he's got to answer, because we know he's going to have the weapons next year. We'll talk about Mike Evans a little later, see if he's still a part of it. But even if he's not, they're going to have the weapons around Baker and, Bucky and so on this offense. And so it's all on him to put things together. And if he does, it will probably save Todd Bowles' job. Also, if he does, and let's say they have a great offensive season, but they still don't make the playoff or something like that, and Bowles gets fired, Robinson would probably be a hot name for some head coaching jobs, maybe even Tampa's head coaching job if they have that good of a season. So there's a lot of things at play here. But yeah, I mean, if you strike out on your first two, you got to get that third one, or you're really, scraping the bottom of the bowl. And thankfully they got the Zac Robinson hire, and, we'll see what happens moving forward.
Well, and Jaron, too, I mean, you mentioned the pistol stuff. I know this is a little elementary, but there were a few times, because Kirk Cousins has lost so much athleticism, not that he had a ton to begin with, but he is so slow now, he couldn't get the ball out to Bijan. Like, Bijan they were trying these stretch plays and stuff, and once or twice a game, it looked like Kirk Cousins was having to fall down, dive to hand off to Bijan. So, yeah, don't worry about that when it comes to Baker also. And, I think you also brought up a funny point that, or Marcus brought up a funny point that, Todd Bowles is very familiar with what the Atlanta offense is capable of doing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what Kirk Cousins did, because the Bucs do have a better quarterback than Atlanta, unless Kirk Cousins is playing against the Bucs, in which case he torched them a couple of times the last couple of seasons. So really 3 times the last 2 seasons. So, I think when you do see your defense, and look, Todd, we know, is a prideful guy with his defense. When you see that defense get torched by somebody, you want to evaluate the why. And if you feel the why is because of their play caller or because of something they're doing schematically, then you're going to have a lot of respect for that. So, again, like, I don't want to market this as a perfect hire. I don't want to market this as like there's no way it will fail. But, again, I do see a lot of the good with it. And to your point, too, Jaron, and we brought this up in a prior show when talking about Mike McDaniel, I think any offensive play caller is very well aware if this ownership, if this franchise is one of the franchises that has hired their offensive coordinator despite being firing their head coach when they did that with Lovie Smith and Dirk Cutter, you can see that writing could end up on the wall again if you produce great offense. And so, I think one last thing I'll mention too, guys, with Zach, is this is the first time Todd is getting to go with fully his choice that has called plays before, because Byron Leftwich had kind of called plays sort of with Bruce Arians, but that was understood he was not moving on from Byron Leftwich. Well, then he hires Canales, and then he hires Cohen. They haven't exactly called a bunch of plays. And then now you go to Zac Robinson, this first dude that you're hiring on your own volition that has called plays before. So that's a little bit of a difference too for Todd Bowles. Again, we'll see if it works, because, again, to be fair, a couple of them did work into being future head coaches. But I mean, again, there's a lot to hit on with Zac Robinson, because, again, we are familiar with him being in the South, and, again, he's just got a lot of those boxes checked in terms of guys that are familiar around the NFL.
Yeah, and one of the things too, man, like that's really good is that you don't have to coach against him. It's kind of the way Jim Tressel turned Ohio State around. Was he recruited Ohio, and he said, I might not play you, but I'm not going to play against you. And I think for Todd Bowles, he can breathe a little bit, that the one guy that kind of dialed him up last couple of years is now with you. As far as Mike McDaniel is concerned, I think, personal reasons, location, job security, probably not wanting to work for a defensive head coach. Because let's face it, guys, the majority of the coaches in the NFL are offensive guys. I mean, the defensive guys, they have a fair share of coaches, but people like to tend, more offensive coordinators are hot. And to see a guy like Jesse Minter and McDonald and those guys get head jobs, especially when they're recent Michigan coaches. Obviously, that's my squad. But, for the most part, offensive coordinators are going to get first dibs when they get hot. All you need is one good year and a good season. You're up for a head job. And all you need is one bad one to lose your job, too. As far as Monken, I think that I don't know if that would have been a good fit if Tampa would have ended up with him. I think he would. I think he wants to work for somebody that he just worked for. And I think, possibly see that in New York once that's announced. So these guys are friends. I mean, it's a business, but there's a lot of different weird relationships in the NFL. And I think for a guy like Zac Robinson, who truly only coached at one place, which was the Rams before he got his opportunity, this is a chance to show that he's next up on that hot list of coordinators that could be in line for a head job too. Let's say he does a good job for 2 years. His name will be right at the top for a head job.
And Marcus, you've touched on this in a previous episode where you talked about how a lot of the guys that had success came from a certain tree. And back when you played, it was the Holmgren tree or the Mike Shanahan tree. So in my opinion, it's never bad to hire for someone from the McVay tree or the Kyle Shanahan tree if you're trying to find an offensive guy, because those two guys and their offensive minds, and then all the people that coming under them, those are the ones that are having the best offenses. Those are the ones whose offenses right now are the hard ones to stop. And so Zac Robinson comes from the McVay tree, obviously being there with the Rams. And I've said it many times, when Baker was there, Cohen and Robinson were the two that were with him a lot of times. Obviously McVay called the plays, but those two were there with him. And we saw how good Cohen did, and now Robinson's the other half of that. So that should at least make you that much more excited. And also it was rumored, or at least reported, that Baker Mayfield played a big role in the Zac Robinson hiring. He wanted Zac Robinson to be his offensive coordinator. And I bet part of it is, as Ryan mentioned, he's had a lot of offensive coordinators. And getting Zac, although it's not exactly the same as what Liam Cohen ran, it's going to be really similar to what he ran. And so at least it gives him some level of continuity going into next season. But all right, coming up next, Bruce Arians had a lot to say on the Kay Adams show, and he talked about Mike Evans and Lavonte David. Does he think they're going to make a return next season? We'll talk about it. Well, the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. Prize Picks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. Prize Picks is incredibly easy to get started. Pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections. Makes watching games way more engaging, especially during the playoffs and the big game. Great way to keep playing fantasy football even after season-long leagues are finished. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, Buck Squad. Real quick, I do want to remind you, this is just extra content that we do. We are so thankful you guys watch us. It doesn't take anything away from what James does. He will still be there with your daily content. This is just something we do twice a week on Monday and Wednesdays. Usually it's at 9 Eastern time, but we moved it up a little bit today, mainly because I'm off work as far as, work from home at least, while all these winter weather storms are going around. And speaking of that, our thoughts and prayers are out for all those that have been affected by that. I've seen devastation in Mississippi, Tennessee. I live in Oklahoma. We got it pretty bad. Texas got it pretty bad. And so if you're dealing with that or your family's dealing with that, I have friends that live in Tennessee and they're without power. So our thoughts and prayers go out to you. But let's dive into the Bruce Arians comments. He appeared on I believe it's the Up and Adams show. It's Kay Adams. It's her podcast. And she was asked, is it legit that we might have seen the last of Lavonte David and Mike Evans in a Bucs uniform? And Arians said, I don't know about Mike, but I think Lavonte probably is going to retire. I never count him out. He goes back every year and sees how he's feeling. The guy's amazing. He just stays in great shape. I'd be shocked if Mike retires. And I feel like that's kind of the consensus that a lot of us have come up with, that it's probably David's last year, but Mike is the one that we think has a better chance of coming back. And I always go back to his comments when he talked about being out with the collarbone, and he talked about just how much he missed playing during that time and how he realized how much he missed it. So that made me think, I wonder if going into this season, Mike was like, this might be my last. And then the injury happened. He's like, oh, no, this can't be my last. And so I would ultimately kind of go with Bruce, where I think Lavonte might hang it up. Although we talked about, I believe it was on last Tuesday's episode, possibly, where we were doing the depth chart or mock draft, and we were talking about them possibly taking 2 linebackers. And I said it would be great if Lavonte could come back and kind of be a player's coach for those younger linebackers. I could see something like that, but outside of that, I think Lavonte probably hangs it up.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jaron, again, and I think that has not changed a whole lot. What I will say is I at least see why Lavonte would come back, whereas if there was a new head coach and he's working with new defensive coaches and that sort of thing, I would find it highly unlikely he would want that to be his last season. Again, I mentioned even amongst the turmoil that the team seemed to have down the stretch, and maybe some of it in the locker room also, that I felt that Lavonte David's love for Todd Bowles was not in question. And so I do feel that having, again, his linebackers coach, to having Todd Bowles still there, I feel that there is still enough there that it might be like a 30-70 comeback or 40-60 comeback rather than like a 5 or 10% chance. As far as Mike Evans, I think that it was at least a possibility for him, and maybe it still is. But as you kind of alluded to, I just can't fathom him saying, yes, I want my last season league to be a year in which I was hurt for more than half of it, that I had obviously my lowest totals all across the board, and the team blew a huge division lead and didn't make the playoffs. Now, again, you can't always get what you want on your way out, but a Hall of Famer like Mike Evans knows that with just more health, he would have a far more productive season. And even though the Bucs are not trending in the right direction, we shouldn't act like they got no chance next year just because they had such a horrible stretch to end 2025. So I think that Mike, being the competitor he is, I think he would lean return. You're right. I think Lavonte leans leave, or not leave, but leans retire. But, of course, you want to hear from them first before we make any of those assumptions.
For me, I think for Lavonte, it's obviously more 50-50. I think he does return. A lot of guys don't like to retire when they didn't go out the way they wanted to, and they didn't make the playoffs. He wants to stamp his legacy as, if that's the case, he could have retired last year after winning 3 straight NFC South titles. They had a lot of promise this year, which is why he came back. It was just unfortunate, and it's because he's a team guy. Okay, so when you're a team guy, you take a look around and say, man, I know I'm getting a little old. Even if he comes back in a backup kind of role, even if he takes a pay cut on the way out, let's say the Bucs draft 2 linebackers and he's there to mentor those guys with Larry Foote coaching them, and things get turned around, but he goes out on top. That's what a lot of the great ones want to do. It's not even about the money anymore. And it's not like Lavonte got banged up like the rest of the guys, like on offense, and Hassan Reddick and a few other guys on defense. This man went out and played. Is he the same guy? No. And I don't think you ask him to be the same guy, but I do think you draft for the future, or you grab a guy out of free agency and you send a guy like David out on top as a conference champion or an NFC championship appearance. And then he walks off the stage as one of the all-time greats, and he goes out feeling good. Nobody in that locker room feels good about how that season went, from Todd Bowles to the Glazers to Jason Light, anybody, Baker. So you don't want to hang them up if you don't have to. If you've got another quarter tank, a half a tank left, go out there and give it your all. As far as Mike is concerned, I mean, I don't even think – how old is Mike, 32? I don't think that –
Yeah, I think it'll be 33 for next year, yeah.
Yeah, I think coming up like August or something, he'll be 33. Relatively speaking, that's not old. I mean, it's dog years in football. It used to be. But when you watch the NFC Championship and you watch a guy like Davante Adams, he's just as old, if not older. He's 14 touchdowns and he's been to that game 5 times and just can't get over the hump. And he's still putting in work. So for Mike, to me, obviously the rumor mill's talking about him going to the Bills. And I just kind of feel like, I don't know if that's a good fit for Mike. I mean, it could be because they don't throw the ball extremely as well as you would have liked to see Buffalo do. I mean, they had to, Cook with 1,600 yards, and Allen was right behind him with 580. Cook probably could have had 2,000 if Josh didn't take off and run so much. But as far as their receiving, they had guys like Shakir, and they threw it to the couple tight ends. You had Coleman out there. I don't know if Mike's a good fit scheme-wise, but he definitely is a weapon. I think Mike still has a lot of left, and I don't think he wants to go out, missing 9 games. He only played, he missed 9 games. They went 8-9. Okay, his streak was broken, but at this point, it's not about him getting 1,000 yards a year. It's about the Tampa Bay Bucs doing what's best for the team, and Mike doing what's best for his career and his family. And then, so you have to ask, do you want to re-sign him for another 2 years for the same money with all these other young weapons that you have? Or do you ask Mike to take a pay cut? Or do you let him explore the market and see if he can get the most bang for his buck? Because Mike still can put in work. I mean, he's a vertical threat. He's a red zone mismatch. He's 6'5". He's proven that he'll get the yards and make the catches. But with Zac Robinson coming to tie that first segment back in, this could be an explosive offense where Mike has a breakout year at that age on a 1-year deal and then go get 2 more years out of somebody like Buffalo. So I think for both of these 2 guys, they can do what they want. I don't think retirement is there for Mike yet. He's too young. I think 35 is a good 35, 36 is a good age for Mike. I mean, he wants to get 2 or 3 more 1,000-yard years. He wants to win another Super Bowl. And I think that's what Lavonte wants to do as well.
Yeah, and to your point, Davante Adams and Mike were in the same draft class. Davante's a year older, but he had 789 yards and 14 touchdowns this year. I mean, he was very productive still. I think if Mike would have had 500 yards or around that this year and played the full year, then I think the retirement talks would have been a little louder. But I think him having the year that he had, but it was because of the injuries. And when he was out there, he still looked like Mike Evans. I mean, don't get it wrong. He still looked like Mike Evans. And then to y'all's point, with all the weapons he had, they have on that team, and on top of that, Zac Robinson coming, he doesn't have to carry the load anymore. I can see it if it was one of those things like, when Megatron was with the Lions and he retired, and it was like, man, it was only really Calvin, and that was it. And if Mike felt that way and he came in and he's like, man, I just don't want to be the only one out there and I'm getting double teamed and all this because I don't have any help, I could see that kind of wearing on you mentally. But yeah, I mean, as Marcus said, he's not necessarily old, and his play hasn't. I mean, it's not like he's prime Mike Evans, but he's not bad either. He's still a very good receiver, still a legit wide receiver 1 or 2. The big question, which we'll dive into a little more next segment, is does he feel like he just wants to play his whole career at one spot? He's won his Super Bowl, and let's see what happens. Maybe I can win another one in Tampa. Or does he say, man, I know I only have a couple years left. I want to go try to win a Super Bowl somewhere, and then leaves Tampa, which we'll obviously dive into that, like I said, next segment. The other thing is, I think if next year, if he comes back and he plays a full season and he has his 500, 600 yards, like I just mentioned, maybe that's when he says, okay, I'm not the player I once was. And we've seen a lot of guys that, especially when they were great, they can't really deal with not being great. And so that's when they hang it up, even though they're still a productive player, but they're not what they once were. And so that's when they kind of step away from the game. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening with both of them. But I think the one thing I will say is I think they, especially Lavonte, I think he's truly contemplating both sides. Otherwise, I think he would have made an announcement already, one way or the other. And I know the season technically isn't over because there's the Super Bowl. But yeah, I just feel like Lavonte, he's the one that is like legit contemplating, do I come back or not? I think Mike has probably already made up his mind personally.
Well, and two, you got to consider the NFL offseason is much longer, and there's a much longer period of time to decide these things. We think of another professional sport like the NBA. Well, okay, the regular season ends in April. You're back in preseason ball by the end of August. And, of course, that's not even talking about the teams that make it into May and June. So you have a more finite window there, where in the NFL, I mean, you got 6-7 months before you really hit the ground running again if you don't make the playoffs. So, I think that's part of it. I want to go back to Mike for just a second because, 80 to 90% of Mike Evans is still a hell of a wide receiver, and I think he would have had to eke his way to 1,000 yards if he had been healthy this year. But you did see in the Atlanta game, that Thursday night game that they blew in the Creamsicles, I mean, that was a heck of a game. I mean, that was vintage Mike Evans. So the rest of his games, I mean, he didn't necessarily stand out in a huge way. But that right there told you that Mike Evans still can be as good as he's ever been at any one time. So, I think he's still got a lot left in him. And I do think that if he does come back, he'll be capable of a 1,000-yard season.
Well, I tell you what, man, Mike is a guy that, he still can take a game over, but you don't want to ask your older receivers to do that. That's why, the situation at Tampa, like, and I know we're getting that to the next segment, but there's a lot of help there, but there's a lot of mouths to feed too. So you almost have to ask yourself, what is it that you want for yourself? And then what quarterback do you want to play for? What vertical passing scheme do you want to play in? I mean, Mike's a guy that they'll be on the 1-yard line and they'll throw a fade route. 99% of teams run the ball on the 1-yard line inside the 5-yard line. So I think at 32, I mean, he's got a lot of gas left in the tank. I just think for a Lavonte, you got to think linebacker is a position where you can't hide. It takes a bigger toll on your body than a wideout. Wide receivers get hit, but they're not fighting linemen every play in the run game. They're not blitzing. They're not covering. They're catching passes. They barely even block anymore. So I just think from a physical standpoint, Mike has a lot more left than a Lavonte does. But I think they both would definitely be valued and utilized extremely well in 2026 if they both came back.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, maybe Mike does look at that and say, again, it goes back to what you said, Marcus. What does he see for the end of his career? Does he want to like be that kind of coach, but also still be a really productive player? Because I definitely think he could have a Lavonte type season where he goes and gets 700 yards and 14 touchdowns, but Emeka takes that next step. And I think that's the key. Does Emeka take that next step? Because really that's what you need. You don't want, as Marcus alluded to, you don't want Mike to have that pressure of being wide receiver one. You need Emeka to now take that step where he's your wide receiver one and Mike is a really good number two or even number three if McMillan even takes another step. And so that would be the ideal situation if he's back, which we'll dive into that coming up next. Well, if you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I need to hire someone for this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, Bucs Squad, we're back here for another segment of the Bucs Squad show. So Mike Evans that we talked about this last segment, does he stay for another year? Does he decide to retire? What if he does decide to play another year, but maybe not in Tampa? Well, Pro Football Focus, they put out their predictions for several players and where they think they will go. For Mike Evans, they do not expect him to return to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Instead, and I saw someone talk about this in the comments, and even Marcus, you talked about it. Instead, they got him going to the Buffalo Bills. So on Buffalo's side, obviously they need wide receiver help. Keon Coleman hasn't stepped up to be that receiver that they wanted to be, and even the owner even said it was a terrible pick while he's still on their team, which is insane to say that. Why don't you cut him before you make a comment like that about a guy on your team? Shakir was a really solid receiver, but you don't need him to be your wide receiver one. You need someone to step up. So for them, it makes a lot of sense. They haven't had a wide receiver one with Josh Allen, except for when Diggs was there, obviously. And so they need that wide receiver one. It might even make sense for Mike because he can get another Super Bowl. But on the flip side, as Tampa fans, we would rather him come back and just finish his career and sell off in the sunset wearing the red.
Yeah, I think in ways it's painful to even consider that notion, right? I mean, it'd be very similar if Lavonte was going to go play a final year somewhere else. I mean, this is a Bucs guy. This guy's going the Bucs Ring of Honor. That means something. And no, it's not just the Tom Brady, here's 3 great years, see you Ring of Honor. No, this is a lifelong Tampa Bay Buccaneer. And, I think for Mike, Buffalo, I guess, makes sense roster construction wise. You got Josh Allen, you're competing for a Super Bowl. I get those fits. I feel like Mike's always been a big Texas guy, though. He's from there. He went to A&M. And, the Cowboys don't have a need there. The Texans could make the argument. Nico Collins is good, but he's been banged up this year. So I think you make an argument there for him. But, just to entertain these notions, we don't know what Mike truly wants. We know the frustrations really boiled and weighed on him at the end of this year. I mean, it was clear. I mean, the Thursday night game we keep mentioning that he had the great game was when he, was screaming and upset about blowing the 3rd and long and all that. So, and understandably so. But, I think you saw a frustration to his season all the way around. He wasn't healthy. He didn't produce the way he hoped. The team did not hold on the division lead after, again, a great start. So, I don't know if those frustrations carry over into the offseason. The only way I see him leaving Tampa is if they do. Because if he cools down a little bit, is like, I'm still the number one here and when healthy. And, I love this area. I've been a part of this community for more than a decade. They love me. I love them. I want to finish it out here. Then, that's going to rule the day. I think Tampa's not going to say goodbye to him. I know that they love most of what they saw from Emeka Egbuka this year. The ending of the year also, like the team, did not work out the way they wanted to. But I just can't imagine them saying, "Oh, Mike, that's great. We'll give you a ceremony one day, but go somewhere else. We're not trying to contend." The Bucs are trying to contend right now, and so it still makes all the sense in the world to retain Mike and for Mike to come back if he wants to.
And to Ryan's point, he is from Galveston, which is an hour from Houston, so he's in that area.
Yeah, and I think you have to ask yourself, if you're Mike, let's just say you put yourself in his shoes, you have to ask yourself, who do you want to play for? All right, like what quarterback are we talking about that doesn't have a guy already? And I think that's why you see the Buffalo talks, because Josh Allen is one of the greats right now, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. They run the ball, but Mike could be the primary target without all the young weapons, the other receivers that the Bucs have. He won't have to share as far as his numbers could go through the roof as a number one in Buffalo. They'll run the ball, hit a couple tight ends, Josh will scramble, Mike will have 1,200 yards and maybe 14, 15 touchdowns, and they'll be competing for a Super Bowl. I think it makes sense. 9 out of the 10 quarterbacks that led the league in passing, the only one that didn't make the playoffs was Dak Prescott. Stafford, Goff, May, Darnold, Lawrence, Williams, Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, and then Baker Mayfield at 10. So with Baker, if you stay, you're still with a top 10 passer in the league. But the other teams, though, they just competed, and so for me, I don't know how much sense it makes, other than, like you said, Houston. And we don't know everybody's budgets, right? We don't know who's under the cap. Well, at least I don't know who they have room for and who they're going to draft. But Mike can go somewhere and add supreme value. And I think that's why Buffalo is probably the prime target, because they probably could get him for not a lot of money, like for his market value. I read something where they're $14 million under the cap and could possibly pay him $13 million and get you a quality number one and compete for a Super Bowl. And then he comes back in 2 years and he retires as a Buck. But I mean, there are some teams that can use him, but it's just dependent on what his role is going to be. Every team in the league will take him. I think the Steelers would take him. But DJ, I'm not a big DK Metcalf kind of guy. I think he's a freak, but I don't think he's a true all-out hands, pure route runner. I think he's a slant guy, and I think he's a vertical guy. You put Mike Evans with the Steelers, and then you get, with McCarthy there, and he knows what to do with receivers. He gets his quarterback. See if you can get him a couple more years. See if you get something out of Aaron Rodgers. Mike could go to Pittsburgh and light it up in a division where that's very winnable. You could also send him to Kansas City as soon as Mahomes gets back right. Trust me when I tell you, Andy Reid will know exactly what to do, and then they'll be competing for a championship. So I think Mike is looking for a situation where he can get his numbers, because dogs have to eat. So we're not going to see a 11 consecutive 1,000-yard wide receiver just be content with getting 400 and 500, 2-3 targets a game. Like you said, it's time to hang him up. So at this point in his career, he can get paid, but he can either go to Buffalo, he can go to Pittsburgh, he can go to Kansas City. I think his money, his opportunity is in the AFC, and then you get away from some of these high-flying receivers, other than the ones at Cincinnati, obviously, but those guys in the NFC, they're just tearing it up. And he used to be one of those guys until he got injured. The man only missed 13 games in his first 12 years. 11, 12 years, this man wasn't missing games. He missed 3 with the hamstring in 24. Then he missed 9 with the collarbone. And that's going to be the only red flag that they're going to have if we entertain him go to another team. How healthy is he going to be if he goes to Pittsburgh? How healthy can he hold up for Josh Allen for 18, 19 games? That's going to be the biggest question when you're coming off of injuries as a premier wide receiver.
As Ryan said, it is very hard when you have a legendary player that's been there for a long time and you see them go play in another uniform. I mean, as someone that grew up in the Oklahoma City area when Russell Westbrook and they parted ways and he first went to the Rockets and he's kind of bounced around since. It was always weird seeing him when he come back to Oklahoma City in that other uniform or just seeing him on TV in that other uniform. But if you're Tampa, you need to do what Mike wants to do. Mike wants to come back, great, bring him back. But if Mike's like, hey, I want to be a contender, send him to the team he wants to go to. Send him to, obviously, if you can work out a deal, that's fair. But try, I'm sure he would give you a list of teams. It wouldn't just be one team. So send him to where he wants to go to. That do right by Mike. First off, and Marcus knows this, players talk and they know, like, if that organization did me right, I want to play for that organization. Because they know, hey, that place will do me right if something happens to me. And so players have those conversations. And so that's another reason why you should do it. But also you should just do it because of the legacy he's left here. And it shouldn't be a sour note for fans if he does choose to leave and he does choose that route. You should be rooting for him. I mean, we're still rooting for Russell to win that championship. He hasn't been able to do it. Obviously, not now that the Thunder are good, but when the Thunder weren't very good, like that was the rooting interest, was get Russell a ring somewhere. And obviously it hasn't worked out. But that's at least my way of thinking about Mike Evans is if he does decide that I want to leave, I don't want you to beat Tampa to win that Super Bowl, but I would love to see you win a Super Bowl wherever you go.
Yeah, I got tough news for you, Jaron. Is Russ is not doing in Sacramento either.
No,
he's still putting up numbers, though. Still putting up numbers. I think, though, that with Mike, too, I mean, look, I think that why, you're right. Tampa does need to do right by him, but I think Tampa still views itself as a contender, and I think that would be the question for Mike Evans. Does he view Tampa as a contender? Because what do you mean by contender? Because I think Tampa can win the NFC South next year. I mean, why should I be convicted in Carolina just because they tied Tampa this year? Bryce Young is still very hit or miss. Why should I be convicted the Saints? They don't know if Tyler Shuck is the long-term answer. Why should I be convicted in Atlanta, who's having to change coaches again and doesn't know if Michael Penix is going to be healthy enough to be the quarterback they thought he would be? No one has grabbed this division. Tampa just kind of handed it off weekly to Carolina this year, but I don't think that's permanent. And so if you're happy with making the playoffs, then that's easy to sell for Tampa. But trying to be a true contender for a Super Bowl, that is not easy to sell with the way this season went with Tampa. So it just kind of depends where Mike is at. And some guys would just love to be in one city if they can do it. Some guys really want another ring. At least for Mike, he has won one. And I think maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You get greedy. You always want to win, right? But once you have one, you don't have to look back on your career and go through a lot of what ifs. If you've never had one, you think you look back at it and said, man, should I have left? Like, this happens in the NBA all the time. Like, name your favorite star player, like Jaron was talking about. Name your favorite star and when he needs to break up from his current franchise to try to go chase a ring. Like that happens all the time in that sport. And it happens sometimes in the NFL, but not as often because the quarterbacks usually stay placed and we don't focus as much on the receivers and DBs and D linemen and all that, although you can make an argument about Max Crosby and so on and so forth. But I digress. That with Mike, again, I think the loyalty he has enjoyed. I think Tampa, again, has the desire to keep him. It'll just be up to what he truly wants in his heart of hearts.
And the other thing, too, is, I mean, let's say he went to another team and had 2 or 3 more 1,000-yard seasons. I mean, how many guys, see, he can kind of write his own legacy and add another Super Bowl with that. I mean, even the way Tom Brady, he was a lifer in New England, and he comes and he wins a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Bucks, and it's like when you think about what Kevin Durant did, obviously, I mean, he blew a 3-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals and then went and joined the Warriors the next year. I mean, get it however you got to get it. LeBron did the same thing where, he took his talents to South Beach. And so, we see that probably more in basketball. And you made a good point about those quarterbacks. They really do stay. Like a Super Bowl quarterback is going to stay and try to get multiple, and people want to come play with them. And so I think that if Tampa Bay can make it make sense for Mike, find a way to keep him healthy. You got a new offensive coordinator. Remember, we started off the show talking about Zach. Maybe there's a meeting that happens where they sit down and figure out what's the plan here before Mike makes his final decision.
Yeah, I agree. All right, coming up next, we're going to look at the AFC and NFC championship game. Our Super Bowl is set. It should be a lot of fun. We'll talk about that coming up next. Well, what if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. All right, Buck Squad, we're back for one final segment here of the Buck Squad Show. Reminder, this is just extra content that we do. It doesn't take anything away from what James does. He does great work Monday through Friday with his daily show. This is just something we want to do extra twice a week. It's Monday and Wednesday nights, usually at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Obviously, today we got started at 7, a little earlier. And Ryan joined us today, and he fills in from time to time. James joins us a lot of times too. But James was like, "Hey, I've talked about Zach about 3 different times on show, so let's have y'all talk about it." So it's been a lot of fun and to talk about all this. But let's dive into the conference championship games. Why don't we start with the Denver and New England game, because that was a game that I was looking forward to, as where I assume a lot of people. Obviously, the weather played a factor. About in third quarter through the fourth quarter, it was a weird game because when it started, field is crystal clear, and then by the end of the third, they were having to use like AI to show you where the markers were on the field because of it. It was so snow-packed. It obviously played a major factor. The weather did. Offenses really couldn't do anything at that point, but that's not an excuse because you had almost 3 quarters to get your offense going, knowing that snowstorm was coming, because you can't tell me they didn't know it was coming. It was reported before the game it was coming. So you knew it was coming, and so you had every opportunity to do that. I will say, and I would love to get y'all's feedback on this, did y'all really think that was a backwards pass? I still have not seen an angle, at least, where I said that was the backwards pass. Every angle I've seen looked like it was a forward pass to me.
Yeah, I unfortunately missed the play live. We were traveling down to Mobile here for the Senior Bowl, which is why there's been some background noise, and I apologize for that. But, I think that just overall what I would say is it's a tough break for Denver because the one thing you couldn't do with a backup is start handing New England points and field position, because the Broncos defense was great. I mean, the Patriots are getting – Drake May's getting Trent Dilfer Ravens comparisons for the postseason of how the defense was so dominant for Baltimore. Dilfer just kind of hung out and just didn't completely mess things up. And Drake May's better than that. He obviously had a great regular season, but just the way that he has played in the postseason, been sacked a lot, he's turned the ball over, he threw for under 100 yards on Sunday. And so those turnovers were a big deal. Now, that leads me to, guys, what I think was the biggest decision, and you kind of broached the subject, Jaron, with the snow coming. When you know the snow's coming and you like the defensive tone that you set, Sean Payton needed to value 3 points in the 4th and 1 situation. And I know hindsight's 20/20 and they lost by 3 and they would have been up 3 and that sort of thing. But, I think that ultimately, if I love my defense and I know I got to win a low scoring game anyway, I got my backup quarterback, I'm facing good defense. It checks every box for, you know what? I know it's very 2008 of me to kick a field goal, but maybe I should do that in the postseason. And so I thought that was a big missed opportunity for Denver. And look, I mean, they had a couple other kicks later in the game that obviously were into the snow. There was a deal where it looked like they lined up a yard closer, which is why the field goal got blocked. Just all kinds of weird, quirky stuff that a snow game gives you. So again, I thought the big story there was, you got off to a good start, and then, the snow was going to come. So, of course, you weren't going to be very prolific in that. But you checked every defensive box. You did a lot of things well. But you left those 3 points on the board, and then the snow just bogged the rest of the offense down.
I tell you what, man, I think the Broncos missed an opportunity. I think the Patriots are one of the luckiest teams, and I think the stars just aligned for them. When you watch a first series or so, and you saw backup quarterbacks, he's out there running around. Everybody's talking about he hasn't thrown a pass, and I kept telling people, this guy's in the NFL, man. This is grown man football. It doesn't matter if he hasn't thrown a pass or if he's the first guy to start an AFC championship without throwing a. Who gives a rat's butt? Here's the deal. When they took them up top and they got that first touchdown, they got the big pass, and then they go up 7-0, I was thinking Denver's getting ready to win this game unless the Patriots get a turnover or they start blitzing. And I'm telling you right now, a lot of times backup quarterbacks become heroes in that situation if they can win, if they find a way to pull it out. I mean, Tom Brady, obviously, his legend came from Drew Bledsoe getting injured. Now, Brady still might have been a good quarterback, but he had a run game and a defense, just like Ben Roethlisberger, run game, defense when you're a young quarterback. But here's the thing, that weather really wasn't a factor until after the Patriots went down. I believe that first drive took 9 minutes off the clock, went down and got a field goal. That's where they won the game. Denver missed their opportunities to score, to get first downs. I think they got out-coached, and I think just that Patriots bad weather lore just fell in their favor. And it's tough, especially when you don't have your starting quarterback. Bo Nix might not have threw that backwards pass. In live time, I didn't think it was backwards. Watching the replay, I think it was a lateral. And I think what made it a lateral, Jaron, is he got hit as he was pushing the ball out of his hands, and his momentum was going backwards. And I think he was aiming forward, gets hit, and the ball floats backwards. But that's why you play through the whistle. And, it should have been a defensive touchdown. I mean, so it's just one of those things where one or two plays can cost you the game. This is why I'm a proponent of this. Every team either needs a dome or they need to play outside. I mean, if these good weather teams are outside, then bad weather cities need domes. Because if the weather's going to play a factor, then I'll just sum it up by saying this. Peyton Manning was on my visit to me with me at the University of Michigan, December 3rd, 1993. You guys weren't even born yet. So you have to understand, I'm a Peyton Manning fan, but I think Brady was better. Peyton Manning was an indoor quarterback. He was a dome quarterback. He played in a division that was considered the South. We're talking about Houston, Nashville, and then Jacksonville. So you have to understand, when he went out there in his career and played against Tom Brady and those Patriots in bad weather, he wasn't the same guy. And so we didn't see that. But the Patriots are built for bad weather games, whether they cheated with Woodson and Brady or whatever, the tuck rule, somehow it always ends up in their favor. But congrats to Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, they are very lucky. They get through it. And to your point, Peyton Manning got through and finally beat the Patriots, not till it was at home in the Dome in Indianapolis. And so that's a good point. And Ryan, you made a good point too. This is where I think coaches kind of dive into the analytics too much. Yes, all the analytics would have told him to go for it on that 4th and 1. He even talked about we had all the success on that play. That's why we ran it. But knowing the snow is coming, take the points, because you don't know if you'll ever be able to score again once the snow hits. So you might as well build up as many points as you can in the meantime. And so, and as we saw, once the snow hit, no team could do anything. I mean, they couldn't kick field goals. They couldn't score touchdowns. Nothing could happen. They couldn't throw it other than screen passes. So that's another reason why you take the points. Now, looking at the other side, at the Rams and the Seahawks game, that was a classic game, 31-27. Seattle wins. I do not, and I saw a lot of people comparing it where they said, hey, everyone's on Sean Payton for not going for it on that 4th and 1. Why aren't you on Sean McVay for kicking the field goal to score, to go to be down 1, to make it 31-30 instead of going for it on 4th and 3 or 4 inside the 10-yard line? The reason why in that situation, if people remember, there were like 5 straight touchdowns leading up to that possession for the Rams. And they had just got off the field. The Rams finally just got off the field and had driven down the field and were about to score to take the lead. You don't know if you're getting the ball back, because there was like 4 minutes left, and they only got the ball back with like 30 seconds left at that point. So 1, you don't know if you're going to get the ball back. And 2, with how hot Seattle's offense was, and you finally got to stop, I don't think the two are comparable, in my opinion. I think in Sean McVay's case, you had to go for it because of what was happening in the game. And in Sean Payton's case, you had to kick the field goal because of what was coming in the game.
I agree with that because, look, the analytics, they try to put in every variable, but you can't. What is that percentage of making 4th and 1 when it's your backup quarterback? What's the percentage what's the win probability when you're up 7-0 with your backup quarterback? What's the win probability when your defense is already playing great and the New England defense is a great defense also? Like it puts a lot of that into it, but then there's still gut feeling and how people are performing on that moment in the recent weeks. I mean, it can only take care of so many variables that are inhuman. There are human variables to it too. And I will say on the Rams side of things, like, okay, like you're right. They had several straight touchdown possessions, but I also have, instead of Jared Stidham, I have Matthew Stafford. Instead of Cortland Sutton, I have Puka Nacua, and I've got Devontae Adams. Like I have more to work with there. I have a premier set of NFL offensive players to try to execute a 3 or 4 yard play. And yeah, it didn't work. And so hindsight will forever be 2020. But you're also talking about, okay, if they are down 1, do they get the ball back any sooner? Because they didn't run any more clock by not getting it on 4th down. I guess you could say Seattle would have started with a little better field position, but then maybe they just get the field goal back and it's still 34-30 instead of 31-27. So there's still too many variables there to prove that, oh yeah, kicking the field goal would have given them a chance to go kick a field goal and win the game. Well, they had like 15 seconds left or 20 seconds left. They didn't have any timeouts. Like what am I? If I'm at my own 10, I'm still at my own 10 with no timeouts. So, I get it, but at the same time, there is too many variables to just say, oh yeah, that field goal would have saved the Rams in the same way that it might have saved Denver.
Well, here's what they say. If it works, it's a great call. If it doesn't, then it was a bad decision. So I think McVay made the right call on the road, gutsy. See, the difference between the Broncos, Patriots, and then the NFC Championship is the Broncos and Patriots was a street fight outside in inclement weather, just toe-to-toe in the phone booth, street fight. The NFC Championship turned into a mid-game track meet, okay? And McVay, I mean, both defenses were struggling. The biggest thing that I think impacted McVay's decision was the drop punt return that led to the touchdown. To me, that's a 14-point swing because then the Rams could have started the track meet first, and they would have been up in that situation. And if you subtract 7 from the Seahawks and make it 27-24, he kicks the field goal then. But when he was down, but I think that turnover, that dropped punt, that which led to a touchdown on the very next play, that took the wind out of the sails for the entire team, even though they did get a stop and they had a chance to go down. Stafford scrambles and, has a chance. He gets the first down and 4th down, and they're making some things happen. But pressure bust pipes. And I think McVay's young enough. I think he's gutsy enough. He's been there enough to where he knew the situation in the game that he wanted to put the pressure on the Seahawks. He wanted to score there and then say, you guys kick a field goal. Because there was no guarantee they were going to get the ball back or if they were even going to get that close again. Now, if it's the regular season, yeah, you kick the field goal. And then you play defense. And then the other team stalls out. This was to go to the Super Bowl. This was for all the marbles. So you got to let it. You got to roll the dice. They're a great team offensively, potentially the MVP with Matthew Stafford, all those weapons, as you said, Ryan. I think it was the right call. I just think they just got D'd up. Witherspoon in the back of the end zone, undercut the route. Seattle just made a play. It came down to just one more play versus the other one. Then they couldn't even stop them from getting 2 first downs after they didn't convert. So almost you were going to get dialed up and the clock was going to run out regardless.
Yeah, and on one of those, I believe it was like a 2nd and 15 when they hit JSN. After that, they get stopped, and they could have had a big stop on that one, but they get the first and running clock and running more clock. But Yeah, they said it leading up to that drive. Rams had the number one offense this year, had the number one passing offense. Seattle was a really good defense this year, but you had them on their heels, and that's another reason why I think you do go for that and try to make it. Did anyone else kind of want to see Matthew Stafford throw a Hail Mary? Because the two passes before that were big-time throws. Now, Puka didn't quite get out of bounds, but those were some big-time throws that even I was like, man, I wish we
I
could,
think you give Puka the catch and let Matthew rip it just for TV.
And it's like the Atlanta game where Puka almost makes this incredible catch at the sideline in a similar situation when they're running out of time. So Puka has one of the best sets of hands in the game. So you throw one up to him, he times it right. You always want to see a good Hail Mary at the end of the game just to see if it's that one shining moment.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Bucs Squad Show. We'll be back Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So look for us then. Until next time, fire the cannons.